It is time for a video game gorilla Donkey Kong fur video. I have mentioned Donkey Kong in other Mario videos, but not like a major one. But the arcade classic has been going on for over 40 years, and I did miss out on it. But as of today, DK's platforming adventure on the Super Nintendo, Donkey Kong Country, has turned 30 years old this year. Yeah, another anniversary from Nintendo on November 21st. Oh yeah, I'll talk about those on the community post. I just put up the Nintendo DS anniversary, go check it out if you haven't already, but I'm covering Donkey Kong Country, so let's begin. The story is not a long one. A bunch of villains called the Kremlins have stole Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong's bananas, and the two set out to recover it. Pretty short, but the focus is on the game itself. Before we get to the game, I should talk about how the game was made. The developers of the game was by Rare, which after this they would make popular video games like Battletoads, GoldenEye 007, Banjo-Kazooie, etc. Donkey Kong was one of them that they made until Rare moved to Microsoft. The game was inspired by the Super Mario series, hence the platformer genre, in which it was a great idea because the classic arcade games had Mario as Jumpman to climb up and avoid barrels. But in this game, DK and Diddy go on an adventure. This is one of the first home console games to feature pre-rendered graphics, a technique that converted 3D models into Super NES sprites, which allowed the game to feature visually stunning environments and characters, which I'll talk about my thoughts on the graphics later. Shigeru Miyamoto did not produce nor directed this game, since he did direct the arcade Donkey Kong game. He did, however, contributed design ideas, and the Stamper brothers, Tim and Chris, directed the game. Alright, let's get to the game. I just want to make it very clear, I think Nintendo did a great idea to give Donkey Kong a platforming game. Mario was the main one during that time, followed by Kirby from a couple years ago, and then a year after Country, Yoshi would get its own platforming game. But yeah, Donkey Kong Country was a great start, and yeah, it's amazing. I'll start with the characters. You can play as Donkey Kong or Diddy Kong, in which this is Diddy's first game debut, and yeah, this was a great choice. DK is the uncle, and Diddy's the nephew. This is a co-op game, but you can play the game by yourself by switching the two characters. The two can jump, roll, and even a ground pound. Yeah, the ground pound is just an extra to hit enemies or get a banana. The rolling is a great way to go. Unsure if the rolling was inspired by Sonic the Hedgehog, but that was good. Diddy Kong rolls faster than Donkey Kong. Besides hitting enemies, they can collect bananas and even letters that spell the word Kong in every level, which makes it worth getting. The collecting bananas does remind me of coins in Mario or rings in Sonic, and after 100 bananas, you do get a 1-up. There's a lot of enemies in the game. Like Mario, there are many variants of enemies, which is a crazy lineup because of the jungle and the wilderness. There's even animals you can ride on. Similar to Yoshi in Super Mario World, you could ride on a rhino named Rambi, an ostrich named Espresso, a swordfish named Ungard, and a frog named Winky. These animals do have different abilities, like Ungard swims faster, Winky jumps higher, Rambi hits enemies, and Espresso floats in the air. There are other Kong characters in the game, besides DK and Diddy. There's Cranky Kong, an old and cranky gorilla that gives advice, Funky Kong that has a plane that can land on any area in the world, and Candy Kong will allow you to save the game. But yeah, this is when new Kong characters were added in later games. Now let's talk about the graphics. By 1994 standards, it looked amazing. Like, yeah, this was pre-3D graphics, but man, it felt like a new type of graphics. Like, yeah, the 16-bit games were great too with the graphics, but nothing like this. I would like to know if this was 32-bit graphics. And I love the world, the details on them, and the sprite on the characters. It looks great. Speaking of that, the level design is fantastic. This is totally different than the Mario games. Like, they can go through barrels, climb on vines, jump on tires, and even riding on minecarts. Like, this is awesome. Plus, so many worlds to go, like caves, mines, snow, factories, and even underwater. This is probably one of the best highlights in the game. And of course, the gameplay is top notch. and if you already know, platformers are my favorite genre, and this one is no exception. There are so many amazing highlights in the game, but one I really love besides any of them is the soundtrack. And I don't know if you guys are shocked by this, but the soundtrack is like my favorite video game soundtrack. Don't get me wrong, the Mario soundtrack and Zelda soundtrack sound amazing too, but Donkey Kong's soundtrack just sounds so realistic. I don't know why, but I love it. My favorite piece of music is The Underwater. Not shocked there, but it sounds relaxed. David Wise composed the music, and man, he did a fantastic job. He might be up there with Koji Kondo as the greatest video game composer. And since Nintendo Music recently added on the app, I highly recommend listening to the music in that game. You will love it. But yeah, as you can see, Donkey Kong Country is amazing. But there's one thing I want to mention, and that is the difficulty. We all know that platformers can be easy sometimes, right? Well, you're wrong. Donkey Kong Country is a pretty challenging game. You can beat the game, but it's pretty hard. I remember playing it during my teenager years, and man, I had some struggles here and there. When one of them gets hit, you still continue once you find a barrel, but if you lose the other, you can try again. Now, the boss battles are not that hard. They do repeat like the Big Beaver and Big Vulture, but even a Queen Bee and a Big Oil Drum. And the final boss is King K. Rool, a crocodile wannabe that shoots cannon in the air and throws his crown. This is a very cool boss. Also, the final boss music is amazing. Another outstanding music in the game. I like that they did show the end credits to look like it's over, but nope. King K. Rool gets up and you gotta beat him again. Honestly, this game is in my top 15 favorite video games. While the sequel is great too, but I have a strong attachment to the first one more. And while the Super Nintendo is the go-to version, it wasn't the one I played first. My first time playing it was on Game Boy Advance, and it was good that I played it without noticing it was a port. There's even a Game Boy Color of the same game, and I guess you can say Donkey Kong Land is similar to Country, but it's a different game. Donkey Kong Country has been out on digital download multiple times. As for sales, the game sold 9 million copies worldwide, and is the third best-selling Super Nintendo game. That's pretty impressive. I know the reception is praised a lot. I loved it too, and I can't wait to play more. Now, as far as my favorite Super Nintendo game, where would I rank this? I'll say it's in the third spot, because Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past and Super Mario World are close to them. But they're all amazing, and they're the top of my favorite video games. That is all for the review of Donkey Kong Country. Happy 30th anniversary to this game. Can't wait to do more Donkey Kong Country games in the future. I will see you all in the next one.